Good evening. Welcome to Mishkenot Sha'ananim, to the 6th International Writers Festival. My name is Moti Schwartz, head of Mishkenot and the festival, and I'm thrilled to open the first event of this year's edition. The Rosie Project, the best-selling novel by Graham Simsion, has sold over 3.5 million copies worldwide and received enthusiastic responses from readers who live with Asperger syndrome, their families, and professionals in the field. Simsion will speak with writer and journalist Lee Lapid, not the first timer to our festival, about how we can and should make the world a better place for people who are coping with autism. I want to thank the Australian Ambassador Chris Kanan for honoring us with his presence, and because of his busy schedule he won't be able to stay with us until the end. And now, it is a true privilege to welcome an Israeli well-known author and a world-known author, Lee Lapid and Graham Simsion.
Okay, so we have a little surprise for you. We will start super different than what I expected, but Graham had a wonderful idea and he wants to introduce it. So, yeah, and he needs the podium back, and he wants to do something, but I will tell you something. You're going to hear something for the first time ever.
I've got my own microphone here, thanks. Shalom, Moti, Ambassador, all the team here. I have imposed upon Lee here a little bit and said, could I do something for about 8 minutes? I'm not sure how this is going to go, whether you'll follow my Australian accent or anything, but it really is the first time. I've written a third book in the Rosie series. I sent it to my publisher on Monday morning, like yesterday. They haven't even seen it yet, and I'm going to read you a little bit from it, okay? So I'm going to warn you, this is
now you understand why I didn't say no.
So I'm going to warn you, this is not meant to be all that funny, so you don't have to laugh. And I'll just, for those of you, I'll just set the scene just a little bit. Don and Rosie. Don Tillman is the hero of the Rosie Project. He almost certainly has undiagnosed Asperger's syndrome / autism, and he's never confronted that fact. He doesn't want to know about it, thank you very much. But now Don and Rosie's son, Hudson, who's 11 years old, the school has said, we think he might be autistic. In fact, they have said, we think he might have autism, and they encourage them to get a diagnosis. They're not too sure about this, so they decided to go along to an autism seminar to hear about it. And the seminar is facilitated by somebody, some of you who read the first book might remember, called Julie, who facilitated the Aspie Kids at the beginning of the Rosie Project. So here we go. Remember, said Rosie, as we selected our seats for the seminar, we're not here to debate the diagnosis and treatment of autism, but to get a sense of the community. Are they talking about kids like Hudson? Are those kids benefiting from whatever interventions are happening? You're suggesting I avoid contributing. What about asking questions? Let's just keep it low profile, said Rosie. There were 2 speakers, both female. One was about 35, body mass index approximately 27, conservatively dressed. The other was about 25. Body mass index about 18, low, but not dangerously so. She was wearing jeans, trainers, and a black t-shirt with the slogan, Autistic Lives Matter. Julie introduced the older woman as Margot, the mother of a boy with autism. Margot began by expressing solidarity with the autism parents in the audience and sympathy for their challenges and sacrifices. She then thanked Julie for using person-first language, rather than calling her son autistic. He's a boy with autism, but a lot less of it than he started with. Margot's son, who is now 16, had failed to develop language skills at the expected age and was diagnosed with autism before his 3rd birthday. Margot and her partner had engaged professionals to provide intensive therapy. This all seemed rational and uncontroversial, but someone in the audience had a question. That person was Rosie. You used the word intensive. How many hours a week? About 25. That was in addition to his schoolwork? Yes, once he started school. And for how long? He's still doing it. And he's continuing to improve. I'm going to talk about this, but he's at a mainstream school, he has friends. Yes, it is a lot of work, not just for us, but for him too. But if you want, how do you motivate a 3-year-old to do all that therapy, said Rosie. The system we use, and I'm going to get to that, has built-in rewards. Black T-shirt leaned into a microphone. And punishments. Remembering that withholding a reward is punishment too. You're using ABA, right? Julie expanded the abbreviation. Applied Behaviour Analysis. For those who haven't been here before, psychologists regard it as the gold standard for autism treatment, as do many parents, but we're getting Black T-shirt interrupted before Julie could get the discussion back on track. I can't let that go. Psychologists and parents love it, of course they do, but that's who it's for, not for the kids being trained like puppies. Now we're in Rosie's specialist area of patient perceptions, and her next question was predictable. What sort of work is being done to get feedback from the kids? And Margot, how does your son feel about his progress? He's getting the dog treats, so how can we tell, said Black T-shirt. He's being trained to spend his life getting approval from others. Ask him how it's working for him when someone uses a screwed up reward system to abuse him. This was excellent. Rosie's questions had shifted the discussion from a single, possibly unrepresentative case study to a discussion about the contentious issues, with two opposing views being articulated. Unfortunately, Julie felt obliged to let Margot finish her prepared speech, which essentially reiterated that her son had made impressive progress in not only acquiring speech, but transitioning into a more socially acceptable person, without addressing Rosie's question whether he was happier, would be better off in the long term. Black T-shirt was introduced as Liz, and she immediately identified herself as both lesbian and autistic. I'm not a person with autism any more than I'm a person with lesbianism. I'm lesbian, I'm autistic. When I get a cold, I have a cold. I'm a person with a cold, and I want to get rid of it. Medical help appreciated. But being autistic and lesbian, that's who I am, and I'm not interested in anyone trying to cure who I am. If they put me in conversion therapy, because that's what it is, for being lesbian or for being autistic, they're abusing me. And if they do it to a child, they're abusing that child. It appeared that Liz had just called Margot, who seemed to be a decent person trying to do the best for her son, a child abuser. Liz continued with a list of things not to say when speaking to autistic people. Examples: you seem pretty normal to me, or what's your special talent, or we're all on the spectrum, and made the distinction between medical disability and social disability with a brilliant example. Imagine everyone used wheelchairs except you, and society was designed to accommodate them. You'd knock your head on door frames and have to ask for a chair at a restaurant. I thought of Hudson and the ski boots. Julie called for questions to both speakers. The first came from a male of approximately 40, estimated BMI 28. I know you said not to say it, but you seem pretty normal to me. He laughed. Liz did not. I mean, you're obviously at the high functioning end of the spectrum. How does what you say relate to... Liz didn't let him finish. See, she said, this happens. I stand up here and ask you not to say something. I tell you it's hurtful and frankly insulting, but you treat it as a joke and say it anyway. So let me say something hurtful and insulting to you. Screw you, asshole! Julie attempted to interject, presumably to call for politeness, but Liz put up her hand in a stop sign and spoke over her. You didn't shut him down when he was offensive, so don't shut me down. But yeah, some other people might want to know if what I said applies to all autistic people, and it does. Yes, there's a spectrum, but it's multidimensional and people's place on it changes over time. Sometimes because of treatment. Liz used, some days I'm high functioning in some areas and not in others, and the next day it's different, but I'm always autistic. It's my identity, my permanent way of being, and those of us who can speak out have to do it for those who can't, such as Margot's son. Perhaps we have a question for Margot, said Julie. Rosie had already breached our agreement to stay quiet by asking 6 questions, so I considered it reasonable to ask one of my own. I began to raise my hand and caught Julie's attention, but Rosie pulled it back. Julie smiled, but Liz pointed to me. Most of you won't have seen what just happened, she said. A man in the audience put his hand up, and Julie nudged Margot. I can tell you right now what that nudge meant. Watch this guy. He may ask something weird. Because he's maybe, oh God, autistic. Am I right, Julie? Julie attempted a response, but it was difficult to make sense of it. And Liz continued. Then the lady beside him, who asked all the questions before, tried to shut him down, didn't you? I was expecting Rosie to respond aggressively. Instead, she just said quietly, "You're completely right. I apologise." "Okay," said Liz, "I'm guessing you're neurotypical. I know Julie is, I know Margot is. We autistics aren't always great with the non-verbal stuff. What we just saw was the neurotypicals using their secret language, like, hey, do you want to take the DOG for a WALK? They used it to send a warning about one of us, to shut us down, to oppress us." She looked directly at me. "Anyway, you had a question?" "Correct, but what you said was so spectacular that I may have forgotten it." The audience laughed, but I sensed in a positive way. I remembered the question. The question was for Margot, as Julie requested. "You can ask Liz a question if you prefer," said Julie. "Excellent, can I have one each?" "That's fine," said Julie. "Margot, you said your son attends a mainstream school and has friends. Is he socially accepted?" "Thank you," said Margot. "I've no wish to shut you down. It's a good question and a tough one to answer. His friends are mainly people like him, people he's met through therapy. It's not ideal, and sometimes we feel we're holding him back. But they're holding him back, but it's a stepping stone." "You didn't answer the second part," said Liz, "about acceptance." I hadn't finished. "I'm not here with any agenda except to share my experiences and hope that it will help others. So I tell you honestly that he's struggling. He's far, far better than he was, but he's not there yet. He's having a tough time at an age when he should be having fun. And my husband and I wonder every day if we're doing the right thing." She turned to Liz. "We know what we're doing is traumatic for him. We know it could damage him. We know he might end up committing suicide. But he was 3. We were his parents. We decided it would be worse if he could never speak or look after himself. Maybe you think it would be okay, but I don't care if you've got the same diagnosis. You're not the same as him and you can't empathise with him. So say whatever you like for yourself, but don't stand up here full of confidence of your smart words that my son would never have had in your perfect world and say you speak for him."
Wow. Okay, I'm speechless.
Maybe not the best word to use.
Yeah. Okay. You know, I'm like, why wasn't Don diagnosed?
Well, Don...
like in your heart and in the book.
Okay, so Don is now 51, 52 years old in the book. So at the time that he was growing up, when he had some really serious problems, he was actually in a psychiatric institution briefly, with all sorts of diagnoses, schizophrenia, potentially schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, depression, and so forth. Never Asperger's syndrome or autism, because Asperger's syndrome, or autism as it would present in someone like Don. So let me just use the word Asperger's syndrome tonight to refer to that group of people like Don, okay, who have speech, who often are, the word high functioning is sometimes used, and that's a bit of a pejorative, but let's say with Asperger's syndrome. That diagnosis was not on the charts back when Don was that age. And now, later in life, having had a whole lot of labels put on him, he doesn't see any need to get another label. And let me be clear, there is stigma associated with that label still, as it is even more strongly with autism. I had an opportunity to sit down with Bill Gates and Melinda Gates at one stage. He's a big fan of the Rosie Project. We had a great chat. First question people asked about him was, does he have Asperger's? And I really thought that through. I thought, you know what, if he does have Asperger's, why isn't he out saying, look, this is what you can do with Asperger's? And the answer, when I really explore it, is that people would start saying things like, oh, well, he's a great philanthropist, but is he doing it for the right reasons? Or is he just sort of a weird guy who's doing it all mechanically? There is definitely that negative. Why don't I diagnose him with Asperger's? Well, when I was writing the book, people say, how much research did you do on Asperger's syndrome? And the answer is, I say, is 30 years in information technology. So I met a whole heap of people like Don Tillman. And if you want me to add, I studied physics, and I was in the radio club, and I played a little bit of chess. I did a PhD at in a science faculty. I met a whole lot of people like Don Tillman, almost none of whom had any diagnosis. In fact, none to my knowledge, because of that and being from that generation. So I draw on them, not on any sort of clinical textbook view of Asperger's, and frankly, I think that's why the book works. because I'm talking about real people, people who I admired, who I loved, who I thought a great deal of, rather than from some textbook definition that I'm trying to mimic. But and I would always say Don doesn't have Asperger's. I can't say he has it because I'm not a clinician. But I sat down one day with Tony Atwood, Professor Tony Atwood, who's a world guru on Asperger's syndrome, and he's a big fan of the book. And I said to him, I never say Don has Asperger's because I'm not a psychologist. And Tony said, well, I am, and Don's got Asperger's.
How did you get into writing about him, about this? It was your first novel that wasn't about business and your work. I know your wife is a psychiatrist. Does she connect it to the?
Yeah, people say to me, I guess you must have really picked your wife's brains, psychiatrist's brains, to get the Don Tillman character. My wife would be the first to say that psychiatrists in general have been way behind on picking up on Asperger's syndrome, and many of them would know very little about it. And frankly, at one stage I said to my wife, are you qualified to diagnose Asperger's syndrome? She said, of course I am. I'm a psychiatrist. I said, yeah. Do you know anything about it? Well.
So you started writing a book. Before it was published, it was already being bought for all kind of countries, right?
Yeah, let me just pick up that last bit of your previous question. Why did I choose it as a topic? Because when I decided I wanted to be a writer, I thought, what can I write about that all the other people in my writing class won't know so much about? Most of the people in my writing class had come from arts backgrounds.
How old were you?
I enrolled in a screenwriting course, so that was the first thing I did in fiction at the age of 50.
Okay.
I know you can't believe it, can you? You're thinking he doesn't look a duck.
I'm 50 on Friday, so it gives me a big pleasure to know that I can study.
You're beginning the best decade, so that's great news. So,
how did you decide to write about him?
Because I wanted to write about something I knew about that other people in the class from arts backgrounds wouldn't know about. Because when we present, see the geek in a movie, because I was thinking movies at that stage, they're usually a bit of a bit character. They're usually drawn pretty shallowly. This is sort of before a Big Bang Theory. So it was just to do something different, to write. You write about what you know, and I knew a lot about these guys and felt that they hadn't really been presented with much depth.
I want to say that the thing I think all of us loved in the Rosie project is that the fact that it got a lot of humor. It's super funny, and you gave us really a big present that we can look at things, smile, laugh, and look at people we know in a different way.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, my comedy teacher, because when I was studying screenwriting, was a guy that Chris would probably know called Tim Ferguson, who was a member of a group called the Doug Anthony All-Stars and a stand-up comedian who has multiple sclerosis. And when he does it's not stand-up anymore, he would do his routine about his multiple sclerosis. And his motto was make him laugh, make him cry, make him think. And laughter, being comedic, does not stop you tackling serious intellectual topics or serious emotional topics. In fact, sometimes it opens people's minds to let you do that, perhaps to think differently or to feel differently, and to empathise. So the Rosie project for me, and pretty obviously in this new book, I'm pretty serious about what I'm writing about, but it doesn't mean you can't laugh along as you read.
Your new book that you read from, and I escaped from asking about it. Wow, because it's super difficult. How much of it started from evenings like that people came and told you, listen, it's super nice, but autism is something super different, and maybe even were angry with you about it?
I didn't get a lot of that at all. Look, I think the incorporation of Asperger's into autism is something that's come out of the psychiatric DSM-5 manual. I don't want to be too technical here, but ICD-10, which is the general medical manual, still sees them as different. A lot of psychologists will still see Asperger's different from autism. I think at the very least, we have to recognise that that big word autism embraces an enormous range of very, very different sorts of people. I mean, the example you gave earlier on, it's unfortunately a disease example, is cancer. You can have cancer which can be a little spot on your skin that isn't actually too risky, or you might be about to die tomorrow from something that's pervaded your whole system. The treatment will be different, all those things will be different. And there's other examples, I mean, particularly around gender and so forth. You can be gay, you can be straight, you can be all sorts of things in between. So I've had very few people push back about the Rosie project. When they do, they're occasionally, not so much parents, but relatives of people who have what I would call the hard end of autism, where their kids aren't able to look after themselves, probably will never be able to, lack speech, those sorts of things. And they say, well, Don is not like my kid. I say, well, no. But Don is quite a lot like a whole bunch of people with Asperger's who identify with him. But equally, what's tremendously important to me is that I'm not trying to put a stereotype of autism on the page. I had a psychiatrist say to me at one stage, you got Don almost right, you almost nailed it, but you got him drinking alcohol. People with Asperger's don't drink alcohol. I said, you're telling me that there's nobody in the whole world with Asperger's who drinks alcohol? And he said, well, it's not typical. So it doesn't matter if it's not typical. Is the man plausible? Because Don Tillman is an individual with his own strengths and weaknesses. He's not a walking Asperger or Asperger.
I was thinking a lot when I read about him. I asked myself, what would happen if he would have been diagnosed as a kid? And I think that maybe his whole life would be different. Maybe he would never imagine that he can find a wife or I think it would change it. That's what I was thinking when I was reading about it.
Look, I would say probably less than you think, because I know you've got experience with pretty hard-end sort of autism. I think that there are plenty of examples around us of people with Asperger's who've made good relationships, who've done all those things. So I don't...
no, of course, that's if that's what being understood. What I'm saying is that I think part of his liveliness and is the fact that he is not labeling himself and no one labeled him. And I think in a way we are in an era that we need to ask ourselves whether to label or not to label. Is it a good thing, and what do we do about it?
It's a huge theme of The Rosie Child, the new book, because Don feels he does not want his child labelled as autistic, because he feels that he doesn't want to be labelled himself for a start, so he's projecting that onto the child. The school is saying, look, we can get some help for your child, we can make it easier for him, and so forth. And Don is in an enormous quandary, and that is really the central question of the book, really, and what Don chooses to do is to coach his son Hudson to be normal, to be like him, to be normal is the wrong thing, to fit in. To fit in, whereas what Don has done, he's never really quite fitted in. He's actually found a community that accepts him. And that's really a big topic in the book. And I don't think it's an easy answer, but I would say the people who've sort of borne witness to me, if you like, that have got diagnoses are almost always happy that they got the diagnosis. They say, I now understand why I've always felt this way. I mean, you can imagine, if you want to use an example, imagine that someone is gay in a community that doesn't acknowledge that it even exists. So they've got feelings towards someone of the same sex, they've got no idea that anybody else is like them. How awful would that be, let alone what it's like anyway for some, in some communities. And I think that's when you say, well, hang on, we can explain this. This is something that happens to a lot of people. There's a whole community out there like you. For many people, it's amazingly liberating.
Oh, and there's a new series that's going to be broadcast in Yes yes, called Ala Spectrum. We want to show you 2 minutes of that because it's related. It's 10 episodes about 3 friends that live in an apartment and they have someone that helps them to cope with real life. And it will start in like 2 weeks. I don't have any connection to the series. I'm not part of it, but I do think that for the people that are here and that are not, I don't know, not super familiar with the syndrome, it will be a little bit interesting to see it.
מה היית מגדיר כחיסרון? כעובד.
אני לא אוהב כל כך שאומרים לי מה לעשות, ואני גם מעדיף לא להיות ביחד עם אנשים באותו חדר, אז אני רוצה חדר משלי, לא שאני חושב שזה חיסרון.
רגע.
אני גם לא אוהב שקוטעים אותי.
את מלצרית חדשה?
כן.
תוכלי להגיד לי כמה זה משה שרת?
זה 20 שקלים.
ומשה שרת יותר גדול מצ'רניחובסקי?
זוהר?
כן.
נעים מאוד, רונן.
אתה שותה יין קפה או מיץ? אני מאוד אוהבת מיץ.
לא צריך לדעת מתי אתה לא רצוי. לא, חכה!
מה מפחיד אותך בחוץ?
אני לא יוצא החוצה, אז אני לא מרגיש.
אולי תלך הביתה, עמי.
אני רואה את הרגליים שלך, אני יודעת שאתה כאן.
אסור שאף אחד ניגע לך, תבינה את זה!
מה אתה עושה פה?
אני חיכיתי לך.
בעזרות שאמרתי לך שיש לי חבר.
רון, תיקח נשימה ארוכה.
טוב, נצא.
יהיה לי חבר, נכון? אני מדברת על זה. אתה גם חושב שאני שונה, נכון?
מישה, את נהדרת ככה. רק צריכה לקבל את זה.
I want to ask about how is it to go back to writing after you wrote such a huge bestseller and everybody are waiting and expecting you to write another huge, wonderful bestseller.
Well, I don't know that everybody was expecting me to write another huge, wonderful bestseller. I think they might have hoped that I would, and I certainly hoped I would. Look, my artistic hero, and I'm allowed to say this a bit more respectably now because he's got a Nobel Prize, is Bob Dylan. And I look at...
You didn't have to get the prize, right?
Yeah, no, he sent Patti Smith to do it. I like to feel I'm a little more social than he is, but artistically, one of the things I admire about him is that even though he peaked, many would say, at about 25, 26 years old, did his most famous work at that age, he has continued to be a journeyman writer right into his 70s. He's still working on new material. When he's had a bad patch, he's covered other people's work. He's always worked. And at the end of his life, he will have a portfolio of work. Some will be brilliant, some will be good, some will be rubbish. But there will still be, even the late stage of his career, some of the very good stuff and so forth. So my goal is to always try to improve what I'm doing, but to build a fine portfolio of work rather than trying to top every previous result. Because some things are going to be critically acclaimed or whatever, critically received. Some are going to be received by the general public in a certain way. My favourite book, I was saying out there, is The Best of Adam Sharp. It's not the public's favourite book, but I'm very happy I wrote it.
And now you wrote a book with your wife together, both of you. Wow, that's an amazing.
Now we've got a session. I think it's Thursday. We'll be talking about that book, 2 Steps Forward. So if you want to know about that, come along to that session.
Right. And I want to say something that we talked about it a little bit before. For me, it was difficult. The first time I started reading Rosie, and I closed it and I said, I don't want people to present autism like that. And that was a few years ago. And slowly throughout the last few years, I got to know a lot of the spectrum because and I have a daughter that she's autistic. What did she say, the woman in your book? To say with autism or autistic? What is?
Okay, well, let me say that with it, I can tell you statistically, within the autism and Asperger's community, there is a strong preference for saying autistic. And outside that community, there's a strong preference for saying people with autism, people first language. And there's a whole argument about whether it's a disability or not. We tend to talk about disease. A person with cancer versus gay, which is part of your identity.
Okay. So my daughter is autistic, and she doesn't speak. She has 3 words, and when I wrote also a book, and she sneaked in. I mean, I didn't want to write about her. I didn't want to write about autism. Actually, what happened was that I started writing the book, and she sneaked in, and then I said, you know what, write this book, because I was stuck. And later, erase her from the book. It was a book about motherhood. And then I finished the book, and I decided that I do want her to be in the book. And it also opened me into talking to people about it, and to tell everybody that they can talk to me about it, because everybody knew, but they didn't talk to me about it. So, because I'm totally shocked after what you read, I want to say what I wrote, and I'm not so sure I would write it today. Okay, so I came one day to pick my daughter out of kindergarten, and her kinder teacher said to me that she thinks she has a problem. She doesn't respond like all other kids. I say that we paid attention already, and we have already appointed an appointment with an ear doctor. At the time that goes past until the examination, we walk around her at home, my man and me, and we make voices, and she doesn't respond. And we start throwing things and make huge noise, and she doesn't respond. And at the night, before the examination, my man hugs me, and I hug him, and both of us can't sleep. And I lie down at that night, and I pray, and I promise everything. Please, God, give me a deaf child, because all other possibilities are so much frightening, so much more frightening. So it is autistic. She doesn't speak, but I think that but she's wonderful, and I wouldn't change her any other ways. I would rather her life be easier for her, not for me. But I think there is this struggle in the spectrum between kids and adults that look for love and being independent, and kids and families that don't see any independence and I think you wrote it so nice when.
Well, look, let me just give a little background to that part of the book that I read, and results. It was inspired. I quite often go and speak at autism/Asperger's. There's still plenty of conferences that say Asperger's, and it makes a lot of sense to me because quite clearly, whatever the medical classification, the challenges facing families who have children like your daughter, and the challenges facing individuals like Don Tillman are vastly different, and I wanted to dramatise that on the page. But that was really drawn from just talks that I heard, dramatised of course, at the Western Australian Autism Conference. And the extreme ends where the guy who stood up and he said, I'm now, I couldn't even speak when I was a kid and so forth, but I had intense therapy, and here I am at 25 and so on. And the woman who stood up and said, I don't, really, if you can't speak, you should be left that way. It's abuse to change it. And so the book is really not quite that extreme, because they have an individual child, and it's how much do we intervene, how much do we let him be himself. And my daughter and my wife, two of the people who read, not quite the draft that you heard, but my daughter and my wife, who both read it, disagree profoundly as to what the right answer was. And let me say, my daughter is right behind Liz, the activist, and my wife is sympathising with Margot, the autism mum. So that's what I wanted. I didn't want to preach to people, but I wanted to see you're in the community already. Most readers are not. Most readers don't have any real connection with autism, except they've heard about it, they've got a distant relative or something like that. And they're not aware. People outside that world, we can forget easily, have no idea about these sorts of arguments and these sorts of issues that are on the page. And I wanted to put them out there and at least expose them.
I think you expose us to really look at people differently. And I think maybe that's the most important thing for all of us in society, that puts each one in a different drawer, and it needs to be exactly how to do. And you know what about what your wife said and your daughter? I think there's not right and wrong. I think what I believe is that there is the person, if he can express what he wants, so that's the best. But if not, so I think his parents sometimes. And we're making mistakes also with our neurotypical kids, right? We're making. Anyone wants to ask a question? To ask them a question?
Yeah. Do you have any personal experience of autism in the family?
Okay, the question was, do I have any personal experience of autism in the family? Look, there's nobody in our family who's ever been diagnosed with autism. If you come along to my session...
Thank you for your question.
Look, one of the questions I get asked is, am I autistic myself? And clearly in the Asperger's sort of space, right? And people ask that seriously. They say, could I write a character like Don Tillman? It's much more flattering to say I'm a good novelist, and I can admit that. But there are identity politics questions about appropriation around all this these days. So I'm going to talk about that side of things on Friday when I do my 7 minutes in heaven. That's I'm committed to that now. I just said I will. I was still debating whether I would, but that's what I'll talk about on Friday. It's possible that my father had Asperger's, but that was coming from Tony Atwood, the psychologist, when I spoke to him, and that's a very interesting possibility, because I would have never thought so. He was a really good sportsman, and Tony's view was that's how men mask it. Women mask it with social skills, so we don't know that women have Asperger's often because they've got some very good social skills layered over the top to mask it. And men who are good at sport or in the military quite often have a whole series of things that they do that are actually quite routine that make them acceptable. You can't be a nerd if you're a top football player.
That's a good idea. Yeah, hi.
Could you speak about segregation versus integration in community life and school?
Could I speak about segregation versus integration in community life and school? Absolutely, but with no qualifications whatsoever. Okay, I think I need to be very clear here that I'm a novelist. And just as I wrote The Best of Adam Sharp, I needed to really get into piano playing and popular music, and I can't play the piano. I needed to look around and form my own opinions, but there are others more qualified to have them. My view, particularly in the workplace, is I think it's really crucial that we open it up as widely as we possibly can for two reasons. The first is my friend who did a lot to inspire the Don Tillman character is absolutely adamant you've got to have a job. The single thing that saved him is he was in an institution at one point and was planning to be on disability benefits for the rest of his life. And a wise psychiatrist said to him, "You'll kill yourself said, what you need to do, I'm telling you, is go out and get a job. He got out and he got a job, and he's still working at 67 because he doesn't ever want to stop working. So he would say, you must have a job. And look, we know how valuable being employed can be for people, or being employable. And the second is that every time you take someone like him into the workplace, our view in the workplace about what's acceptable and what people who might be a little different the way they present can do broadens out and broadens out. Just as once you've got one person with a wheelchair, you're going to put a ramp in and so on, we become more accepting. If I can just say that there's a company mentioned in the Rosie project, which I actually name in the final book, called, I think, a Specialist Turn, which is a Danish company, which specifically hires people with Asperger's syndrome to train them as computer systems testers, which they have a lot of talent for. And we've now got one of the universities in Australia, so you're putting people in the workforce, is training kids who wouldn't make it into Specialist Turn, who can't quite get that far in, to give them the skills they need to get a job with them. So it's just spreading the net wider. I think it's wonderful. And I think the more that our schools can reflect that same sort of attitude, the better.
I'll tell you what I think. I'm not going into housing and everything, but I do think that when I grew up, we didn't see disabled kids. We didn't see special kids. We didn't see, they were not in our classes, not in our schools. And I'm so happy we see them today in schools. I think it changed every class and every school that there is a special kid, and then they're not afraid to help them be in the workplace. I think workplace is even more important than anything, and it's super important for people to have work. אני אגיד לך בעברית שקוראים לזה מרכזי תעסוקה תמיד, and I think תעסוקה is something that you give a child to do something. So I think work is very important.
Mary, I had a grandson who was diagnosed as PDD. Do you know what exactly PDD is? Is it kind of Asperger? Anyway, he finished high school here with flying colors. He's a real genius. He doesn't really socialize, although here and there he's got some friends. He's now at the American University in France, and there he's outstanding. So what is that? Is that kind of Asperger?
I am totally unqualified to answer your question. So, but let me just flag that, as with sexuality, sexual orientation, and so forth, and gender, these things aren't always nice, simple answers. And particularly when we're talking about mental, psychiatric, psychological states, we talk about in the book. Where do you draw the line? It's not a hard line, and there might be lines in other directions and so forth, but certainly I can't talk about, certainly not an individual case, and I can't even talk about differential diagnostic criteria because I'm just as novelistic.
When conversations like that move into Asperger autism, it disturbs you that we're not talking about writing and
the book that Anne, my wife, and I wrote, 2 Steps Forward, set on the Camino de Santiago, the famous pilgrims walk in France and Spain. We get to question time and nobody ever asks us anything about writing the book. They want to know, how do you find the hostels? Was the food any good?
So it's all. I think actually writing, the writing itself, it's a little bit boring to talk about, but do you feel that there is someone inside of you that writes that or
No.
No.
It's me. No, I may have Asperger's, but let me tell you, I'm not schizophrenic. Wow, the voices are telling me. No. Look, I actually kept a diary of the writing of the current novel because I was interested. How can I put it? I'm a got an academic background. I'm always interested in deconstructing, understanding what's going on. So this time I kept a diary of all the stages of this book, which I've written over 2 years.
What do you mean? You wrote a book and then you wrote on the side what?
Every day I wrote what I'd done. Just what progress I'd made, what the date was, and so on. Just so I could answer questions like how many days did it take to write the book, how much time do you spend on planning, because I might write a book about the writing process, just because other authors may be interested. And it's good to write from truth rather than what you decide is what happened afterwards.
Wow. Yeah. You're his teacher,
yeah,
right? Guys.
So the first time I read Graham's, I gave him an A for his assignment on computers, right? The second time was the Rosie project, and I thought, unbelievable, how could this be the same person? So my question, actually similar to what you just asked, my question to Graham is, do you feel that you changed into a different person when you turned into a writer, or were you writing or speaking from the same person?
Wow, that's an interesting question. This is Michael Sager at the back of the room, was my MBA supervisor when I was, I started my MBA when I was 25, so it's a little while, more than 10 years ago. Look, a lot of people say to me, you used to work in information technology, how does it feel working in a creative profession? I say, hold on. I mean, the average person may not see the creativity in, say, designing a database or writing a computer, but human beings are creative animals. We are creative in almost everything we do, right down to cooking a meal or deciding where to go out to dinner. And I found I could transfer a great deal from my previous life, which I needed to do because I was a late starter, into my writing life. Creativity in general, my PhD is actually in creativity, so I actually went back and sort of studied how that sort of worked. The ability to manage a large project. Writing a book is a really big undertaking, and psychologically, logistically, everything. And you get plenty of people who can write a fantastic 2,000 words, better than me. In writing class, I was always jealous of people who could write 2,000 beautiful words, but they couldn't write 80,000 beautiful words and make it a story. So, I learned a lot from the previous life. No, I don't feel I'm a different person. I feel I'm the same guy doing something different, using a lot of things that were there before. A person who's learned a whole bunch of new skills. And the biggest lesson I took for people who think of writing and that, the biggest lesson I took from my earlier life was how long it took me to go from there to being an expert in my profession. And I figured it was going to take as long or as much work to go from starting writing to being an expert novelist. And I think it's a single thing that the other people in my writing class didn't get because they were just kids and they thought they could go to the pub and all that sort of stuff, and they had to still learn it for the first time.
Wow. Yeah.
So I worked hard.
You are from the right, and then
the two of us.
Yeah.
I'm also Australian, but I am very aware of Asperger's because I have in my husband's family, we have 2 nephews, and okay, we know about Asperger's. My problem with reading the Rosie Project, which I reread before I came here, was feeling uncomfortable that I was laughing at Don Tillman. I always feel, I discuss this with my sister-in-law, I say, are we allowed to laugh at Aaron? She says, yeah, well, what else are we going to do, like when he does something slightly weird. That bothered me though, it still bothers me.
Yeah, look, I think you were laughing, though, at Don Tillman for the same reason that you laugh when you watch Crocodile Dundee. I was speaking to an Australian here. And it's the fish out of water syndrome, and when you tell that story properly, and there's another famous Australian book called They're a Weird Mob, same sort of thing, when an Italian comes to be in Australia. And there's always the two sides to the laughter, because it's about that. Laughter comes to me unexpected. And sometimes Don is doing things which are foolish on his part, if you like, get him into trouble. Sometimes he's calling out conventional behaviour, and we're seeing it through his eyes and saying, well, that's really crazy, and we all do it. But we laugh sometimes because Don is simply the truth teller, the man from Mars who's looking at what we do and laughing at that, and sometimes we laugh at the trouble that he gets himself into. But we're fundamentally laughing at the unexpected, not at his at anything we call a disability.
I think the gift that he gives us is to look at ourselves and see that what we think is so normal is super weird. Yeah.
You said that you modeled Don's behavior on that of people who you work with and people who you know. But I'm wondering how you actually got into his head and wrote about his thought processes and the things that he was asking himself and analyzing by himself.
Okay, I had a little secret. How do I get into Don's head? And this is going to sound really simple. I just imagine that I am working on a scientific task. So I'm a former computer guy. So you imagine that I'm working, and the two of us are working on solving some problem with a computer program that's got a bug, okay? So I'm going to say, is that correct? And you say, no, that's not correct. Does that work? I'm not going to say, how do you feel about this? Well, feelings are not part of this task, okay? We've got a job to do. So Don, if you like to read him, is a scientist. Don's approach is a scientific approach, and he applies it right across what he does. And most of the time, that gave me clues to his behaviour. Now, I also drew on things I'd seen people do, but it was really a scientific headspace more than anything else.
Last question before we. Oh, two. Okay, the two of you. You and you. Okay.
Stereo.
She's over there. Yeah.
I really enjoyed your book, and I have a twin brother that has Asperger. The question is not about the Asperger thing. It's about, don't you think you want to do a movie about that? The project.
Okay. You know what? I sometimes when I'm doing an event and there's a bookseller there, I used to put 50 Australian dollars, which is 150 shekels, on the table, and say, if nobody asks me about the movie and who I would like to play Don Tillman, you can keep the $50. And I never lost the $50. So it's right near the end. Sony Pictures optioned the Rosie Project screenplay, which I wrote before the book, because remember I was studying to be a screenwriter. Nobody wanted my screenplay until the book became a bestseller. So Sony Pictures own it. They haven't just optioned it, they actually own the screenplay. It's been up and down. We've had lots of famous people. We've had Jennifer Lawrence and other names I'm not supposed to tell you, but lots of names. They're on and they're off and so on. It's like having a lottery ticket in the back pocket. You just hope it comes through one day. So I'd love to see the movie made, especially because I wrote the screenplay and an original screenplay. So at Oscar time, it's not an adaptation; it's an original. So, but look, the rest of Adam Sharp's been optioned. Tony Collette optioned that. Two Steps Forward's been optioned with Ellen DeGeneres and so on. They're all lotto tickets in the back pocket, and you just keep on writing.
But I think it's a very interesting detail that it started the Rosie Project as a screen play, as a screen. Yeah.
Not as a book, it's a screenplay.
No, I wrote it as a screenplay first, but nobody wanted my screenplay. I thought, because everybody wants to adapt best-selling novels, I thought I better write it as a best-selling novel instead of get it adapted. So that's what happened.
I'll tell you what, it's much less expensive to do a book than a movie. Yeah, last question.
About how you're reading writing, how it deals with weird people. Now, if you think of Shakespeare, the really wise people in Shakespeare are fools.
Yeah, the interesting comment. The really wise people. Two things really there. One about how do you write the weird people, and two that in Shakespeare the wise people are the fools. The truth teller is a staple of literature. The fool who says the emperor's not wearing any clothes or whatever. And Don, to a certain extent, fulfills that. He's a naive person, the person from Mars who doesn't understand all the context, and as a result, points out what we would see if we stripped away all of that context. And so the second part was.
Well, just about the wise people being fools.
Oh yeah, good. Okay, I think I did that.
So we started with talking a moment ago. We need to finish, so I'm starting to close it. And about work. So I have a friend that decided to take someone with Asperger to his public relation firm to work there. And then they had a meeting with the sausages factory. And they were talking about it. And then he went into the room and said, "You are selling something horrible to people. Horrible. It's really horrible." And everybody said, "No, but sausages are horrible. So about the guy that says the truth. I think this talk, I think John, I think the Rosie project and everything, and the movie that we saw, that will be a series. It's the beginning of an era that we talk a lot about the spectrum of autism. I think talking about it is super important. I think giving voices to the woman that says, I'm autistic and don't change me, and to parents that say, I don't know what to do. I just want to save my kid. All those voices have a place. And sometimes we talk about it, all of us know we have our right. I think no one knows. I think I want to say something about a little thing that I want to share with you. There's a beginning here in Israel of this group of people that are autistic that don't talk, but they write. There's a woman named Yael Cohen that she started this whole thing, and my daughter is there for like 4 years. And I'm not talking about it ever, and I didn't write about it, but it's when it's a community thing, so I'm talking about it. But I just want to say, before you say things that you want to close today, is that this week she wrote, there are a group of non-verbal autistic, and she wrote, I'm an artist. Wow. So I think art is the thing. So now you close that.
I don't have anything to add to something as powerful as that, except to underline it, that art can tell us things, even truths, that can be very hard to tell in any other way.